By the name of Almighty and His gracious. Peace be upon you, all brothers and sisters. May Allah bless you all. Our story for today, my friends, is a different one, is unique. It is one of a kind. I don't know if we can say it is a Gothic or has some Gothic elements in it, or even horror. But for me personally, I loved that story. I loved every moment with the hero. I pictured every little detail, and it made me feel mixed feelings actually. So I recommend this one if you like this type, of course. Fine, now let's get into it. To start with, wherever the desert is, and in every territory that's known to be a desert, there is always a person that takes hunting as his favorite hobby. A talented hunter with an innate ability to aim and a passion for the hunting profession. So, it will be familiar to the people of this desert that this specific man is the go to hunter of the territory or village. Our today's story is about one of those. His name is Rashid, one of the oldest, most expert wild animals hunters, like wolves, hyenas, and other dangerous predators. Rashid, my fellows, who's from the generation of 1972, he always boasts that this is his favorite hobby, and he always mentions the dangerous places he attends, no matter if it was at night or at the middle of the day, including this area that he headed to this time, with the knowledge of how dangerous this area might be. This area is so risky that he must at least inform someone about him existing there, as usual, because whenever Rashid goes in a hunt, he used to tell at least one person of his destination in advance. However, fate willed not to tell anyone this time. Wolves, to your knowledge, fellow audience, in the 70s and 80s used to target and attack sheep herds who were loose in the middle of the night with their shepherd's company. At night, shepherds used to take a nap in some place of the desert, and with the darkness of the night, it will be difficult for them to sense a predator's danger. Only after some killings happen, a shepherd would be alarmed. The time a shepherd takes to get up and notice predators in his herd will be enough for a massacre to happen. A shepherd will be astonished of the massacre a wolf can make. He will witness the bloodshed of the poor sheep. Some will be found with a slaughtered neck, and other will be without any legs to stand on, and blood will be everywhere. Imagine that this act can happen only by a single wolf alone. When a wolf attacks some herd, it can easily kill over than 15 sheep. Of course, the wolf is not going to eat each one of them, but the wolf's vicious and dangerous nature will make him kill a number of sheep out of instinct and probably hunger. So it would be pass through them and bite some sheep's neck and move to other's back and another's leg or head. It's really shocking and dangerous, the nature of wolves, especially the ones who exist in Abdulaziz Mountain, which is notorious for containing the most vicious wolves in Syria. The mountain also has hyenas living in it, and it's described of being very big. It can swallow cities in its wideness, for it ranges about 90 kilometers long and 15 to 20 kilometers wide. It consists of forests, valleys, and summits of other smaller mountains. It's like entering a mountain fissure only to get out approximately after 4 kilometers. Danger and mystery will be there waiting for you. People can easily be lost in it. In such places, wolves and predators exist and can be noticed in the middle of the day. People talk that Rashid is a man known for his solid courage, high skills, and hunting expertise, to the extent that when Rashid seeks a wolf, he never hesitates or backs down or feels afraid. He immediately marches ahead, non stopping towards the wolf lair, dragging himself through it with only his bare hands fighting and confronting the wolf, which is something really extraordinary and unbelievable because it's a deadly situation. It is considered dangerous and frightening to confront a wolf from afar, even with a rifle pointed at it. So how come Rashid get too close from a wolf and only uses his bare hands? Rashid makes it possible through his long years expertise and even boast about it, saying, "The wolf is the one who feels terrified of me," as if they are inheriting this thing with their genes, he says. As I understood that those wolves use some kind of a language only to warn themselves and alert each other about this specific man and how dangerous and strong this man is, who is Rashid, of course. He continued by saying that they even know the very smell of me when I am around their territory, and they are familiar with my name and use it among them to warn, each other from danger, which is Rashid. Can you imagine, guys? Rashid is the danger for them. He is the source of danger, and not vice versa. It's worthy to mention that he does not kill these wolves, but only capture them, and of course uses specific and vivid methods that are used by an expert wolves and hyenas hunter. There are many methods that Rashid used to secure a successful hunt. One of them is when Rashid runs after a wolf on his motorbike, keeping a specific distance between them, which will leave the wolf exhausted, out of breath, and full captured at the end, after a distance of 8 kilometers as Rashid had estimated. People were astonished of his bravery and used to ask him how it's possible for you to launch an attack on such a fierce creature like wolf with no fear or hesitation. And Rashid used to respond that when this fierce and bloody creature as you describe stands against me, I throw a plank at it and it turns to a little frightened fox. And foxes in this territory and among those people are an example of cowardness. People asked him how you do it or what's your ways to catch a wolf without killing it and even drag it to the market and sell it. It's worthy to know that catching and selling wolves became a popular trade in the last decade, and the estimated price is approximately around 1,500 to $2,000 per wolf, so it is considered a profitable job for Rashid. Yet Rashid had to quit this profession in 1997 after some unfortunate accident that laid heavy weight on him. Rashid says that what he does is he throws a plank and covers the wolf's mouth and sharp fangs with it, and starts to wrestle with the wolf by fixing the wolf's shoulders to the ground, and by this the wolf will not be able to bite Rashid or do him any harm. The wolf even starts to salivate under exhaustion and will struggle just to take a breath under the plank and eventually will calm down and surrender to Rashid's power and courage. Rashid will track down and follow the wolf on the motorbike until the wolf's heart will burst inside of his breast because of non-stop running and almost dies out of exhaustion. He talks with his people about his early start of this profession and says, out of hesitation, I used to throw a plank on the wolf's face and cover it all, and as a result, the wolf dies out of air lacking in its lungs. But now, and after I gained a proper knowledge and expert in this profession, I leave the wolf's mouth and nostrils uncovered so he won't die out of suffocation, and there will be a space for it to breathe. I only cover the wolf's eyes, and after it calms, I tie up its four legs. A tie for the wolf's back legs and a tie for the frontal legs of the wolf. Then I hanged it on a hook, just like a loaf of meat that's being roasted on fire. After this, he grabs the wolf and settles it on a specific made handle on the back of his motorbike that's specifically made to hold a tied wolf on it. Then he gives the wolf a time to take its breath back and then tie his mouth with it. Not just immediately tie the wolf's mouth, but he will give it a little of time in order for the wolf to breathe properly and feel calm and recovered. After that, Rashid puts a specifically made bridle for wolves, a muzzle-like bridle made in particular to be placed on the mouth of wolves. This way, if the wolf tries to attack or bite Rashid, this specific made bridle would be a good deterrent and at the same time the wolf would be capable to breathe naturally. Rashid moves the wolves to his place and take care of them. He raises them and breeds them with each other and make a good trade of the wolf's puppies. Back at the days, to your knowledge, people used to slaughter wolves and sell each part of a wolf's body in the market. Rashid says that when a wolf dies in his wolf's farm, he slaughters it and chops it to pieces, and continued to say that every single part of a wolf's body has its own price in the local market. For example, a wolf a wolf's fangs has a specific price, and a wolf's eye also has another price in the market. It's worth it to consider that the market of this trade is very high and profitable. Rashid Fellows asked about what these parts are used for and who on earth offers money to buy such stuff. Who might be interested in buying a tail or a tooth of a wolf? Rashid responded that this question is complicated and has a controversial answer. He went on explaining that these body parts of the wolf are used in witchcraft and sorcery, and especially hyena's body parts that are demanded excessively in the market of witchcraft. And each part chopped out of a hyena has its own price and its high value in the market. Most people weren't aware of this matter, and all started throwing questions about the little details, only to find out that there is a completely another universe concerning this profession. That year, fellows, in 1997, Rashid was tracking down a wolf, and the hunt started from some desert land in a valley to a mountain with a distance of approximately 12 kilometers. Rashid makes it worthy to know that when a wolf is near a mountain, it will be difficult for him to track the wolf down because of the narrow nature of the mountain, as you know. Rashid managed to figure out that the distance between the land they are on and the mountain is estimated between 11 to 12 kilometers, so he could hunt the wolf before the latter reaches the mountain. He described the wolf he was hunting as being a huge wolf who was larger than any other wolves and wears the black color. It's known that most of the wolves in that territory are brown or honey in color, but this one is a rare one, and it's black color. Rashid followed the wolf, armed with a rifle, so it's possible for him to shoot and kill this black wolf. But he affirms that he does not kill wolves or hyenas, but in fact, he gave them shelter and benefit from selling their puppies, as we said before. But if a wolf is injured, Rashid would slaughter it and sell its parts because it's not an easy thing for a wolf to recover from a wound. Rashid is hunting this wolf during the afternoon, and he was from his village of a distance estimated about 40 kilometers. Rashid missed telling everybody of the household about his location because he thought it will only be a short walk and in no time he will come back home. So Rashid must tell anybody where he's going to be, which is something unusual. So Rashid tracking with haste this black wolf and noticing how powerful and unusual the speed and muscles of it. He's different than any other wolf and faster by far. Indeed, the wolf made Rashid follows him all distance of 12 kilometers. We measured the exact distance later on, of course. He followed it to the mountain and ended up in a narrow rock fissure that Rashid can hardly fit in. The wolf himself can hardly fit in, actually. He went off his motorbike and left it approximately 3 kilometers away from the place he's in. Rashid got himself into that fissure and noticed the wolf and the exact place that the wolf was going to hide. Rashid started dragging himself through the fissure and saw a cave that was located on the edge of a cliff. He was looking all over the place, telling himself that it's going to be a rough mission because it's a very narrow fissure and that he's going to have to jump over the cliff to reach the cave the wolf went in. Rashid started wondering where could it be the lair of this wolf, because the cliff which the cave is located on is about 200 to 300 meters high from the ground, and any misstep or any little mistake will make me fall and end up a dead body. There's no place for mistakes in this kind of situations. He says that the whole area around him is built on rocky and full of very hard, sharp, and pointy flint stones. Rashid made up his mind that no matter what happens, he's going to hunt down and catch this wolf. After all the trouble he has been through, he will not get back empty handed. Rashid went out from the fissure and slowly started walking on an edge that's not more than a 60 centimeter wide towards the hole where the wolf hid. The burrow was too narrow that even the wolf barely got through inside of it. Rashid tried his best to get into this burrow but could not make it. It was deep but narrow and probably only the head of Rashid could fit in. So he took a step back and started thinking of a way to get into it. He tried again and used his flash to light the inside of the burrow to find out that there is a big rock which blocking the entrance of this burrow and made it look narrow and tight all the way down. But actually, the burrow was wide and deep. Rashid's mission was to flip this rock to make the entrance wide for him to fit. He luckily had with him a cleaver. For those who don't know what a cleaver is, it's a tool with a heavy broad blade used by butchers for chopping meat and bones, but its handle is made from wood to make it easier to grab. So with the cleaver, Rashid started striking the rock from all sides. The rock was described as a big one, and Rashid said that the wolf was immediately behind this big rock, and the moment it falls off the cliff, he will be capable to see this black wolf. Guys, it is very astonishing the courage and bold this person has. This courage either stems from an expert or a heartless person, definitely. His mission now is to grab the wolf behind this big rock. He started striking it from all sides, over and over again, and it took him a decent amount of time that is almost sunset. Rashid started talking to himself at that moment about going back and leaving the matter behind him, because it was getting late. But he was determined on his mission and kept digging the blocking rock. After a while and a lot of effort, he felt that he shouldn't stop and must keep going forward. Rashid was narrating the story to his people and told them that I wish that I gave up. be satisfied with the results and went back home. But that didn't happen. It was God's will that I stay there, and there's no way of turning back on God's will and God's destiny. After a while, an improvement has been done because of the hard work of Rashid. He started to open a tunnel from the bottom of the rock that gets the deep burrow behind. And then he started digging the upper side of the rock and around it to make it loose so it can be removed. The night started falling, so Rashid took out his flashlight and tied it around his head like a helmet. So wherever Rashid moves his head, the flashlight will follow. He was equipped with the proper tools that a decent hunter needs. Rashid continued with the story, saying that he had on him all the needed weapons, but unfortunately, he left them all on the back of his motorbike in order to be light in weight and run after this black wolf, fastly, of course. He didn't plan to come this far and didn't expect things to be more complicated than that. So he didn't have any kind of weapons or anything to aid him but this wooden knife and his bare hands and fast legs. That's all. After his attempts of digging from the upper and bottom side of the rock, it's now about to be demolished because of the effort he exerts to flip over this big stubborn rock. He settled himself, lying down, and with his knife hitting the rock. But no matter how much Rashid hits it, it doesn't seem that it will make any movement out of his way. Because this rock is made out of the hard flint stone, and the nature of this rock is making it hard to break down. Rashid was there sitting and feeling exhaustion. And the time was not helpful because in any moment the wolf could run off away. He was sitting exactly in the wolf's burrow in front of the rock, and his legs were spread down under the rock through the small tunnel he dug. Rashid, feeling tired, took some rest and lighted up a handmade tobacco cigarette, saying to himself it's time to have a break. He was smoking his cigarette and thinking about a way to complete the digging work successfully. Are you ready, guys? And there came a stunning surprise that was waiting for him, that made him scream loudly out of shock and pain. He didn't know what was going on and what even happened. He started yelling the name of God Almighty. He felt traumatized. As he says, I felt like the night fell on me, literally. Limitless blackness. It was the rock, actually. And there, the rock suddenly fell, struck upon me. Unfortunately, Rashid did not calculate the rest of digging such a big, heavy rock. And actually, he was sitting under it and didn't think to himself that half of his body was under this rock and it could easily fall on him out of the perpetual digging at any moment. That's what happened. The rock fell and it was like the falling of the night, unpredictable. Rashid's right leg was stuck under the rock because the position his body is in. His legs were stretched to the inside of the burrow and it immediately fell off on both of his legs. Can you imagine how hard this could be? How painful? Rashid started screaming out of pain and agony, out of shock at the same time. The night was coming and he was in the middle of nowhere. And not a single person was around to hear his shoutings for help. He felt miserable and out of control of his position. Started to wake up of his vanity and false pride. Like if the rock woke him out of his stubborn, he immediately regretted his stubbornness and blamed himself because he stayed there and didn't get back home. But Now, there is no escape, and regret won't help him out of this situation. He has to do something. Rashid every now and then screams as loud as possible. He can't help but screaming because of his pain. His left leg was demolished out of the heavy weight of the rock. The bone structure may have remained the same, but the meat was squashed completely, and his knee was crushed to the ground and under the weight of the rock, and this is only concerning his left leg. His right foot was completely wedged under the rock, and the blood began to stagnate in it from the pressure resulting from the weight of the rock. An hour or two later, Rashid began to feel that the blood had stopped flowing in it. He kept striking the rock with his matched with over and over again and tried his best to drag himself from under the rock, but every time he moves a little bit, it was very agonizing. While he was screaming his heart out, he felt kind of a sudden warmth beneath him where he was laying. The temperature under him felt rising. Rashid looked at his legs to check where the rising temperature is coming from, only to see his own blood all over the place, bursting out of his legs and reached his back. He used his hand to reach for the blood and then looked at it to find out the big amount of blood he had shed. He felt agony and didn't know what to do or how to act. Rashid managed to use his head scarf to tie up his left leg directly in order to stop the excessive bleeding. He thought to himself that he must turn off the flashlight in order to save the battery percentage because Rashid doesn't know how much of a time he's going to be there and even will probably stay the whole night stuck on the big rock. The pain was indescribable and unbearable. Imagine how incapable a person in this agonizing situation could be. The wolf was not there anymore. It ran away and escaped out of the place. Rashid continued telling the story by saying that he once again managed to tear a piece of cloth from his cloak and pants, tied them together, and used them to tie his right foot and stop the bleeding from it. The time now was about 1 or 2 in the morning. He says that every time he hears a movement or some sound coming from afar, he starts shouting for help as loud as possible. God, help, people! Rashid didn't have any supplies with him. No water, no food, not a single thing. Nothing could be helpful. He loses hope because he's too far away from any sign of civilization or people, and he's in the middle of the night at around 2 a.m. No one but a person who gave up his life would ever come to such a place. A place in the middle of nowhere. Rashid fell asleep out of his agony and woke up laying on his back to feel the day of the rising sun. He slept all night without knowing or feeling it, because the pain he suffered pushed him out of his consciousness. He had a coma and woke out of it when the daylight broke. It was 7 o'clock in the morning. He woke up hallucinating and in a trauma and even thought that it was a bad dream, and all of that didn't even happen. Rashid was completely helpless. He could do nothing but scream loudly, shed tears painfully, and ask God for help. He had no control of the situation. Looking around all over the place, he thought that maybe he could, you know, see a car, even if it was far away. However, it was impossible for him to get the attention of the people in the car because of the long distance. And even if he used a voice speaker and shouted as loud as possible, they will not, most likely, not hear him. Rashid pulled himself together, asked help from God, and with the machete he had, Rashid tried to break the rock around his right leg. It was God's aid that this idea crossed his mind. Rashid's left leg was whacked under the rock completely. It was fully smashed, as if there was nothing left there but rock on rock. Any small or inconvenienced movement would bring the most indescribable agony and pain to him. He will scream out of pain uncontrollably, so he was striking the rock slowly and carefully, and breaking some of it till evening came. Eventually Rashid managed to loosen his right leg and slowly withdraw it from under this heavy rock. But he scraped his leg accidentally while pulling it out. In fact, it was already scrapped. But concerning his left leg, Rashid was hesitant and didn't know how to drag it out. After he freed his right leg, he felt a relief because he was in a condition that didn't allow him to lay down properly. On his second night in the hole, Rashid felt a kind of numbness, and the blood in the veins of his legs had dried up, and that he was in dire need to relieve himself. There was nothing he can do. Rashid tried to poke his legs with his fingers, but he didn't feel any sensation from his legs. He said to himself that his incapability to feel the pain is probably because he have been paralyzed, or perhaps it is a feature in the human body that relieve pain and to help reduce it. He fell asleep the whole night and woke up determined on praying. He made up his mind to pray in his place, and it was a good timing because it was dawn and a suitable and decent time for prayers. While Rashid was praying, he heard a common sound out of a sudden. He immediately started shouting, but with no answer or reply. Rashid shouts tirelessly, but no answer is coming. When he was telling the story to his fellow, he told them something astonishing, something unbelievable. The sound that was coming from afar was the sound of the black wolf that he was hunting and ended up with him in this very burrow. He started to imagine that maybe this wolf came back to check on Rashid's situation, and telling himself that it is not possible, and that the wolf only came back because it's his burrow and he lives here. But Rashid felt it. He felt like the wolf is there to check on him. Rashid was holding the machete with his hand, and he was ready for anything, because in the deteriorating condition of Rashid, and him not being capable to make any movement, he would be an easy prey for this wolf. However, the wolf did not attack. Rashid felt guilty, and made sure at that point that the wolf really did came to check on him, as if some relative is paying you a visit while you are in a hospital. But the surprise is yet to come. On the third day of Rashid being trapped, and during the afternoon, he felt despair. He had no choice but to pull himself out from under the rock, even if it will cost him his own leg. He told himself that no matter what happens, even if my leg got cut off, I have to get out of this predicament because his blood started to smell and this will put him in danger because the predators will easily smell him from afar and will not hesitate to attack him at night. He knew that if he spent another night in this cave, he probably will not make it alive out of there. Rashid started trying to pull himself out as hard as possible, but his attempts failed. There was no space for him to pull himself away from the rock. The burrow was too narrow and tight. He didn't care about the safety of his leg anymore. The agony and suffering he was in made him think of the probability of chopping his leg off. He just wants to get out of there alive. And indeed, Rashid held the machete with his hand high in the air and was determined to hit his leg with a heavy blow to smash the bones and ligaments that were still tightly attached to the rest of the body. The bones are still hanging tight, and it was hard to detach it from his body in order to gain his freedom. Can you imagine? Rashid, after asking help from God, hit his wounded leg so hard, but it didn't seem to make any result or effect. The hit did not make any difference because the machete he held was not sharp, not even a little. It was a terrifying situation, the agony and his will to set himself free. This situation demands a true grit, a bold man with a heart of steel, to think of cutting his own leg with his own hands. Oh, how terrifying. The strike Rashid did to his own leg made the pain even worse than before, for Rashid even started to get used to the pain he felt before the strike. But now, after this necessary life determined strike, it felt like he literally killed himself. He burst screaming all over the place, non-stop screaming out of pain. Rashid did it again. Another strike. But this time the blade of the machete went about 1 or 3 centimeters, no more, with horrible pain. So Rashid tore another piece of his clothes and used it to drain the blood that was coming out of the spot he was hitting on his leg. Indeed, my friends, it was a tragic case for our brother Rashid. He felt unreal, as if he was in another world. Reality started demolishing around him. Rashid stated that he couldn't see what was around him or in front of him, because when he entered this hole, which its width ranged between 60 and 70 centimeters, and when he was cramped and the rock fell on him, a heavy rock that weighs tons and tons. No matter how much he tried, but Rashid was unable to move it or push it away, not even an inch. So he wasn't capable to lay an eye on the back rear of the rock or the end of the burrow from the other side. Rashid continues to tell, I fell asleep all night till the sunrise. I woke up at the break of the day, desperate to send my prayers to Allah for help and aid. I asked help from the Almighty and started poking my memory for all the good things I had done during my life. I started counting my good deeds in a desperate attempt for God to have mercy on me and pity for my helplessness and release me from this horrific situation. Now, my friends, let's go see the attitude of Rashid's family in these times. The entire family are in complete search for him. Where did this man disappear? All of his family are confused about his location or where he could be. And now the date is the fourth day morning of the accident. His family searched for him everywhere, and they even weren't capable on finding his motorbike because of the ruggedness of the area and its distance from any indication of civilization. At the main time, Rashid is there, prays the dawn prayer. He tells, I was asking God for help and praising God while trying to tie up my leg and dry the blood of it. And then, out of a sudden, Something happened that made the blood froze in my veins. It wasn't fear, but I felt that my life is coming to an end. I felt the existence of an animal in the opposite side of the rock, but I couldn't tell what was it. Is it a wolf? Is it a hyena? They were even more than one animal. I felt goosebumps. It was a shocking event for me. I said to myself, this is the end of it. This is the end of my life. He says, but I wasn't capable of seeing them because the rock was blocking my sight. And from the other side, the animals were there, stepping, going, and coming. Rashid was able to hear them. It was a horrific situation for him. He says, I felt the animal sniffing my legs. When this happened, I had a despicable feeling. I felt humiliated. The animal started licking my wounded legs. I began to scream out of fear because this animal could easily chop off my leg if it wants to. The blood on his legs was clotted and stiff, and it smelled heavily, and that smell is the reason for the animal to lick Rashid's leg. These predators all started licking my legs, and when I make a screaming sound, they would hesitate and back off a little. Rashid says, I was screaming and shouting the name of God Almighty, and my screams would back them off a little bit, but eventually they would come back and start off the licking again. I knew they were hyenas, because no animal makes such things and eats rotten meat except the hyena. It is almost 1 p.m. now, and I was there, screaming, terrified and helpless. One of the hyenas devoured all of the toes of his left leg, the bottom of his left foot, and a complete part of it. Of course, Rashid felt only a slight of sensation in his legs because they were almost completely numb. Even though his legs were numb, still the scene was horrific. It sent goosebumps all over his body. Rashid was screaming his heart out when the hyena chopped his leg off. Rashid started screaming hysterically. Oh Lord, God, save me. The hyena was completely in control of the situation and had the upper hand because Rashid was trapped and incapable to make any movement. If there weren't this big rock that's blocking Rashid from his legs and the hyenas, he would easily attack these hyenas with his machete. He would scare them off or even kill them, but it was not possible because no matter where he moves, he was not able to stretch himself out to attack these hyenas. Rashid was literally hearing the bone of his leg cracking under the pressure of the hyena fangs. To make things even worse, these hyenas started to gather around and increase in number, devouring his legs with non-stop appetite. Rashid lost it all. He was out of his mind. He felt given up and prayed for God's mercy, which might be the only thing that can help him. And out of a sudden, pulled himself out with a lot of grit and found himself unexpectedly about half a meter far away from the rock he used to be stuck under. His leg was still there, stuck under the rock, separated from him. Out of his pain, agony, and his instinct to survive, Rashid got the urge to drag himself and escape from the open side of the burrow. He started throwing himself and dragged his beaten body out and crossed from over the rock with his machete in his hand. When the hyenas sensed Rashid approaching, they immediately ran away. He kept throwing his body forward through the burrow and kept going on. Rashid's legs were both tightened with pieces of his cloth, and every now and then he would stop and adjust the ties. Unfortunately, his leg from the knee and down was not there. The hyenas completely devoured it wholly. But from his knee up to his waist, the rest of his leg was still attached. He was trying to drag himself all the way to safety with every breath left in him. There in the area was a narrow car route that rarely a car passed there, and it's situated about 3 kilometers away from his place. He was thirsty, hungry, almost blood dried out from his veins, and totally exhausted. So he was not able to head for his motorbike. He was barely dragging himself out. It was almost a miracle that he could drag himself. Rashid dragged himself from the afternoon of that day till 11 a.m. the next morning. It was when he was spotted and rescued by people on that sub-road. He was found with blood covering all over him, and even he left behind him a track of blood all the way from the mountain. He was using his hands to push himself ahead, and one of his legs was missing, while the other was almost paralyzed because he had lost his feeling of it. Rashid told his people that a guy named Abu Okla, driving his car on the road, found him lying on the ground. This guy hesitated at first and even didn't want to park over out of surprise or astonish. Rashid said that you can't blame this guy about his hesitation to rescue because a man like Rashid, with his clothes torn, his legs missing, and blood covering all of him, would be a sign of trouble. The guy stopped his car about 50 meters away from Rashid and was looking at him from the driver's seat mirror. Rashid could not even lift his hand to wave at this guy and ask for help. He was too exhausted because he had been dragging himself more than 3 kilometers. He desperately wanted to give this man a signal that he's not a source of danger. He wanted to wave as a sign of a call for help and to assure this man that this creature was indeed a human being and not some kind of evil character in a horror movie. The road was almost in the middle of nowhere, which made this man even more suspicious and terrified. Eventually, this guy, Abu Okla, came to the rescue. He asked Rashid what had happened to him and caused all those plots. Rashid told him that he needs help and can't even have the power to explain. The good man lifted Rashid on his shoulders and took him to the car and headed right away to a hospital. Thank God, Rashid was safe. With his leg being chopped off from the knee down, the doctors had to perform a surgery to cut about 20 centimeters above the wound because it could cause a serious infection like gangrene. And concerning his other leg, the doctors made the decision to cut it off. But at the last moment, a doctor decided to perform a healing session. That's about soaking his wounded leg in a medical liquid for a certain period of 2 to 3 days, which will eliminate all kinds of bacteria. Now, my friends, Rashid lives with only one foot and walks with crutches, telling his story that caused his permanent disability wherever he goes. He says, more than 9 times the hyena gnawed at my flesh, and I heard the crackling of my bones inside his jaws. This way we come to an end to our today's story, which was a real life and death situation. I hope that you like the story, and I leave the commentary for you, dear audience. Please do your best to like and comment to make sure that you're always notified with our exciting and thrilling stories. And we meet in a new beautiful story. Bye bye.